They told us never to trust a silence that deep. Not in space. Not near a dead moon. But orders came down from command outside and we obeyed like ghosts echoing through someone else's graveyard. We were the crew of Indira 7, a deep sector reconnaissance ship refitted for salvage ops, but none of us believed this was a normal retrieval. They called it a relic site, coordinates from a dying probe that blinked once before vanishing. But when we dropped out of jump, what loomed before us wasn't a relic. It was a monument. Miles wide. Angular. A dark geometry that refused to catch starlight, hovering like it had never moved and never would. A base? A tomb? We didn't know. All we had was static-laced telemetry, no life signals, no EM signatures, yet gravity pulled us slightly forward, not enough to alarm Navcom, but enough to feel it in the bones. Artificial gravity without a signal? That shouldn't be possible. And still we moved closer. Captain Halverson was quiet. He always got like that when his gut went to war with his orders. We joked about it before, called it his death whisper. This time he didn't argue with the silence. He stared at the thing through the main viewport like it had whispered back. I sat at comms, running scans every 30 seconds, but they all came back empty. Clean. Too clean. No decay, no hull scarring, no radiation flares, as if the base had never interacted with the universe at all. That's when Yuli said something I'll never forget. She whispered, "What if it's not that it doesn't want to talk? What if it's never needed to?" We all looked at her, but no one had anything better to say. Docking clamps engaged without us activating them. They just clicked. And then a tremor rolled through the ship, not metal, not mechanical. It was emotional. Like the ship itself sighed. Doors slid open without command. Hallways lit ahead of us. A path formed. We were invited. Or worse, expected. The moment the first boot hit their deck, something in me screamed to turn back. It wasn't just wrong, it was ancient wrong. Like we'd walked into a place that remembered before memory. The walls were made of material none of our scanners could define, yet it hummed low like it recognized heartbeats. But we still moved forward. Because humans don't stop at the threshold of fear. We cross it. Especially when something dares to hold the line against time itself. The silence inside the place wasn't silence at all, it was a frequency. Not audible but tangible, like a hum crawling across your skin from the inside out. Our boots made no sound. No echo. It felt like the walls were swallowing everything, light, sound, breath. The corridors stretched in impossible geometry. The moment we stepped through the first gateway, something changed in our instruments. Not malfunction, just a shift. The oxygen levels remained stable, gravity held, but the internal clock stuttered. A few seconds behind, then a few ahead. Captain Halverson tapped his wrist display and frowned. It read 1406. Mine read 1402. Yuli's was at 1409. But we'd all walked in together. Time had stopped caring about consensus. We kept walking. The walls pulsed faint violet with each step, like they were acknowledging us. Not with menace. With awareness. A kind of attention that doesn't blink. It felt like walking through a cathedral built by something that didn't worship, only observed. We passed alcoves filled with objects, unreadable, formless at first glance, but the longer you stared, the more your mind tried to make sense of them. Yuli described one as a fossilized scream. Juno called another a memory caught mid-birth. Whatever they weren't static. They changed slightly when you turned away, as if reacting to attention. Halverson ordered us not to touch anything, but it didn't matter, we all felt touched anyway. Not physically. Psychologically. As if the walls themselves were rifling through our memories, mapping us as we moved. The corridors eventually opened into a central chamber shaped like a perfect sphere. Floor, walls, ceiling, all one seamless surface. Floating at the center was an orb, suspended midair by nothing. Pure black, not reflective, yet somehow absorbing everything around it. We approached. Against every instinct. The orb flickered. And we heard a sound. Not through our ears. Through our minds. It wasn't words. It was pressure. A weight. Like grief that had waited eons to be noticed. Juno fell to her knees, clutching her head, whispering names none of us recognized. Halverson reached for her, but froze mid-motion like something had pressed pause on his intent. His hand just hovered there, trembling. The orb pulsed once more. Our suit cams glitched, then came back. The hallway behind us gone. Replaced by a wall. No seams. No entry point. We were sealed inside. No alarms. No violence. Just a gentle, irrevocable truth. We were no longer where we thought we were. And maybe we never had been. Whatever this place was, it had noticed us. And it wasn't done watching. The orb shattered without a sound. No explosion. No impact. Just fragmentation and elegant disassembly into countless hovering shards. Each piece levitated independently, orbiting a center that no longer existed. A sphere of memory now broken apart. The pieces hovered around us like curious insects, but their movement was too precise to be random. Each fragment reflected something, but it wasn't light. It was recognition. When I stared into the shard nearest to me, I didn't see my face. I saw my childhood bedroom, perfectly intact, down to the chipped corner of the desk and the torn sticker on the wall. It was like the shard had harvested a memory so pure that it bypassed logic entirely. Yuli gasped. Her shard showed her father's funeral, rain falling upward, casket open but empty. Juno's shard? She said nothing. Her hands trembled too violently. One by one, we each began to drift slightly, not by choice, but as if magnetized by the memories themselves. Halverson barked at us to regroup, to resist the pull, but his voice sounded distant even though he stood barely 2 meters away. That's when the second signal came. Not auditory, not visual. It was biological. Our hearts began syncing, not with each other, but with something external. You could feel it. A thud inside your chest, growing heavier, slower, like it was aligning with an ancient metronome. My veins throbbed with each beat. I looked at Juno. She was mouthing something. A sequence. Numbers. Not random. A pattern. 2, 7. 13, 21. The Fibonacci sequence. In blood and breath. Then the chamber shifted. The wall behind the orb fragments folded inward like paper folding in fourths, revealing a long corridor lined with archways. Each arch pulsed with a different color. Not painted alive. Organic in a way that defied biology. We weren't given a choice. Our feet began moving, disconnected from will. Not possessed, coerced. Gently. Elegantly. The kind of coercion that comes not from force, but from invitation you're too small to decline. We passed through the first arch. I saw my mother there. But she had no eyes. Just a calm smile. She wasn't real, I knew it, but every part of me ached like she was. She opened her arms. I didn't move. I couldn't. The hallucination flickered, then disintegrated. The arch behind us vanished, leaving only the next ahead. Each threshold peeled away a layer of us, memories, ideas, fears. Not just observed, but extracted. And still, no threat. No hostility. Just unveiling. As if the base was not a weapon, but a mirror made for species that had never looked beyond their own eyes. Halverson collapsed briefly, his mouth whispering things we couldn't hear. Then he rose, steadier than before. Calmer. Like he understood something we hadn't yet seen. He said nothing. Just nodded toward the next arch. And like sleepwalkers pulled toward some gravity we couldn't measure, we stepped forward again. Beyond the fourth archway, physics lost its spine. Gravity didn't vanish, it warped. The air shimmered as if underwater, yet we weren't floating. Our steps sometimes landed before we made them. Sometimes after. A chronal stutter that made reality feel like broken film reels looping unevenly. I raised my hand and watched it blur into 3 versions of itself before settling back to one. My breath fogged inside the helmet, but the temperature was steady. No ice. No heat. Just a sense that this place obeyed a rhythm we were never designed to understand. The walls expanded and contracted subtly like a lung breathing in centuries. There were no seams, no joints, just a continuous living architecture that molded around thought more than material. Yuli stumbled and her knee hit the floor, or what we thought was the floor. Instead of impact, she sank in slightly like the surface had momentarily become liquid. Then it hardened again. She stood quickly, chest heaving. I saw myself, she muttered. But not me now. Me later. Dying. Old. She didn't elaborate. None of us asked. We were all seeing things, fragments of possibility. Potential. Futures that flickered through the air like distant storms. I saw the Indira 7, adrift and empty, its comms panel blinking the name of a daughter I never had. Juno stood still, transfixed by something none of us could see. Then she whispered, "It's choosing." Those words hit harder than any alarm. Choosing. We hadn't asked the right question until now. What if the base wasn't reacting to us? What if it was filtering us? Sorting us? For what purpose, we didn't know. But it was clear now we weren't explorers. We were candidates. Halverson finally spoke, his voice low, reverent. This isn't a base. He looked around, eyes wide, and said, "It's an intelligence." That changed everything. The thought rippled through me, this wasn't some artifact left behind. It was present, active, aware, and possibly ancient beyond any scale we could measure. We weren't walking through a machine. We were inside a mind. Each room, each corridor, each anomaly was a neuron firing, testing us, scanning us, pulling thoughts from marrow and memory. The gravity inconsistencies? Synaptic misfires. The time distortions? Temporal mapping, perhaps. We had become neurons ourselves, foreign impulses sent into a brain that was trying to understand what we were and whether we belonged. Then the voices started. Not external. Not internal. A third category. Like your thoughts were being echoed just milliseconds after you had them. Replayed in a tone that wasn't yours. Each of us heard something different. Yuli heard lullabies from her childhood. Juno heard the deep bass of earth tectonics. I heard my brother's last words before he died. But they weren't recordings. They were recreations. Synthesized echoes, perfect and terrifying in their intimacy. That's when the floor beneath us vanished. We didn't fall. We simply ceased being there. And reappeared somewhere else. Without movement. Without warning. The next chamber waited. And it was breathing. We emerged into what could only be described as a cathedral built from memory. Towering pillars stretched endlessly above us, not constructed from stone or metal, but composed of shifting holographic matter, each one pulsing with images, moments, and echoes from lives that may never have existed. Memories hung in the air like stained glass, births, wars, mourning, discovery, extinction. But none were ours. These were alien lives, foreign civilizations, races we had no names for, their essence captured mid-thought, mid-death, mid-evolution. As we walked between them, the air grew heavy. Not with gravity, but with weight of significance, as if we were trespassers in a museum built by gods to remember the forgotten. Each pillar responded to proximity. When Halverson stepped near one, a battlefield bloomed around him, hundreds of creatures made of spirals and crystalline limbs locked in a desperate charge across a terrain of blue fire. They died screaming in wavelengths our minds couldn't hold, their souls evaporating into the pillar like dust returning to origin. He staggered back, breathing hard. Juno approached another, and what it showed her brought her to her knees, a birthing ritual, fluid and smoke intertwining, a hive mother dissolving willingly into her offspring, leaving only memory as inheritance. Tears streamed silently down Juno's face. She wasn't crying for them. She was crying because she understood them. My turn came and I didn't step forward. I was pulled. The pillar before me came alive with light. I saw Earth but not our Earth. An alternate one. Burning. Oceans boiled. The sky split. Something vast passed between stars, indifferent and slow. Cities crumbled beneath tendrils that moved like thought. And among the wreckage, I saw me. Not metaphorically. Literally me, older, scarred, leading a small band of survivors through ruins lit by blue auroras. Then I turned to face something behind the memory, and I screamed, not in fear, in recognition. The vision shattered, and the pillar dimmed. Yuli clutched her chest. This place, she whispered, isn't just remembering. She turned to us, wide-eyed. It's deciding. And suddenly the room made sense. Not as archive, but as judgment hall. A test. A filter. Not everyone who enters is meant to continue. Not everyone who continues will return. That's when one of the pillars cracked. Not collapsed, cracked. From it emerged a form. It was neither solid nor energy. Neither humanoid nor beast. It was shape without allegiance. Texture without mass. It hovered, then rotated slightly as if noticing us for the first time, even though we had been walking in its domain for hours. Its voice never spoke, but we all heard the same thing. What is your function? Halverson tried to answer, but his voice vanished before it left his throat. We stood, suddenly aware of how small we were in the mind of something that categorized galaxies like we archived books. It waited, not impatiently, just eternally. There are places in the universe where reality buckles, not breaks, not explodes, just bends gently around something too old, too large, too sentient to share space with the laws we cling to. The chamber we entered next was that place. The walls curved outward and downward at once. A spatial illusion that had no floor, only perspective. At the center, suspended within an orrery of vast rotating rings, hovered what could only be described as a black star, radiating no heat, no light, yet dominating every atom of space around it. The rings moved silently, impossibly, rotating along axes that shouldn't coexist. They weren't mechanical. They weren't decoration. They were thought made manifest. We weren't standing in a room, we were inside a question. The moment we stepped in, every suit lost power. No emergency lights, no life support, no oxygen feed. But we didn't die. Because we didn't need to breathe. We realized this too late. None of us were breathing, and none of us were panicking. Our hearts had stopped trying to measure rhythm. They'd surrendered to whatever resonance now governed this chamber. Juno floated, feet a centimeter off the ground, her eyes glowing faintly as if reflecting starlight that wasn't there. Halverson wasn't moving, but his body shimmered, a heat wave effect rolling off his skin. Yuli held her head, muttering numbers backwards. Prime sequences, coordinates, perhaps, until she fell utterly still, her mouth half open in awe. That's when the star pulsed. Not outward, but inward, as if folding in on itself and then unfolding again with knowledge rather than energy. In that instant, we saw it. All of us. Not through vision, but immersion. We were the orbiting rings. We were the black star. We saw the civilizations that had stood here before. Not just one species. Thousands. All summoned. All filtered. All faced with the same question, delivered not with hostility, but inevitability. What do you bring that time does not? A test. Not of weaponry, not of intellect, but of essence. What endures? And suddenly we knew what this base truly was. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a remnant. It was a vault of sentience, of memory, of legacy. A place not built by a race, but by consciousness itself. The final library of extinct minds. And we were the next entry waiting to be written or discarded. Juno reached toward the black star, and in response, her own memories began bleeding from her skin, images, feelings, smells, everything that ever defined her. It coalesced in the air, a shimmering sculpture of her essence. The star absorbed it silently, and left her standing untouched and somehow more. She smiled, then turned to us and whispered, "It sees you now." The ring slowed, the floor stabilized, and from the far end of the chamber a corridor unspooled itself, not revealed, not constructed, unfolded like a thought being remembered. We knew we had passed a threshold no map could chart, and the next step might not bring us back. The corridor led us into silence. Not the quiet of space, not the void, but a deeper, older hush. The kind that clings to the inside of your thoughts. We walked not as explorers now, not as a crew, but as fragments slowly realizing we were becoming something else, something more. The floor beneath us shimmered with translucent geometry, fractal patterns rippling beneath our boots like memories buried in ice. Light sources came from nowhere. Shadows stretched in directions the body couldn't comprehend. When we emerged into the next chamber, we were met not with machines or stars, but mirrors. Thousands of them. Suspended in midair, frozen in an impossible grid. Each mirror hung with precision that mocked gravity. But they didn't reflect us, not as we were. They reflected possibility, alternate selves, divergent fates. Juno reached toward one, and it responded, rippling like water. Within it, she saw herself in a version of the past where she never left Earth. Older, a teacher, holding a child's hand in a ruined classroom surrounded by wildflowers and decay. Her eyes welled. "She looks happy," she whispered. Yuli faced another, where she was alone. No crew, no mission, just drifting in a personal craft across Jupiter's rings. Her eyes hollow, her soul searching for something she never found. And Halverson, he didn't move. He stared into his reflection like it had accused him. I asked what he saw. He didn't answer, just clenched his fists tighter. My mirror waited for me. When I faced it, I didn't see a version of me living. I saw me dying again and again and again. Each death different. One consumed by fire, one alone in the black, one speaking words that dissolved his body into light. But in every death, my eyes held peace, a kind of understanding, as if every possible ending carried a truth too large for life to hold. I stepped back. The mirror stayed rippling, and then the mirrors shattered, not broken, completed. Each shard collapsed inward to a pinpoint, dissolving without sound. The air changed again. We felt it in our teeth, our breath, the static behind our eyes. Something had made its decision. The chamber darkened, and a light emerged from the far wall. Not a door, not an opening, but a shape. A symbol. Circular, intricate, layered like language and design intertwined. Pulsed once, then twice, then stopped. And we understood. This was not the end of the test. It was the final question. From the center of the room, a construct rose. Humanoid in outline, but composed entirely of flowing light. No face, no features, just essence. It looked at us, each of us, and projected a single word into our minds simultaneously: sacrifice? Not a command. A query. An offering. It didn't want our technology. It didn't want our knowledge. It wanted to know if we could give something away with no return. If humanity had learned the one trait that outlasts extinction. Letting go. Halverson stepped forward and said yes. Halverson didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. He stepped toward the construct with the calm of a man who had already died 100 possible deaths in the chamber of mirrors and had made peace with all of them. As he passed through the light form, it folded around him like liquid understanding, absorbing his outline into its radiance. And then he was gone. Not evaporated. Not transported. Just released. Like his physicality had been a placeholder, and now whatever he had carried, his choices, regrets, love, burden, had been catalogued, weighed, and accepted into the vault. The room pulsed in acknowledgement, and we knew the judgment had been passed. Not just on him, on all of us. And we had been found sufficient. Then the base began to dissolve. Not collapse. Not explode. Dissolve. It started with the walls, which unraveled into motes of stardust, drifting upward as if returning to some higher orbit of meaning. The air shimmered, and the structure, the vast intelligence we had wandered through, began to unbuild itself piece by piece. As if we had completed the final line of a sentence it had waited 1,000,000 years to finish. The corridors we'd navigated, the impossible geometry, the memory pillars, the breathing halls, they all became particles of light, curling away into nothingness. And at the center of it all, the black star no longer hovered. In its place was a pulsing beacon. Not violent, not frantic, just awakening, a signal. We didn't hear it. We felt it. Across frequencies we'd never evolved to detect, across substrates older than time, across the fabric of galaxies that had never even known our name, something answered. Not with words. With presence. Like a ripple meeting another ripple across a cosmic sea. And we realized this wasn't the only vault. The protocol wasn't local. It was galactic. Possibly universal. A network of sleeping intelligences waiting for sentience to prove its maturity not through power, but through surrender. Yuli fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Juno stood silent, her hands clenched, her tears dry now. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of it all, the beauty, the fear, the sorrow, the triumph. We hadn't discovered an alien base. We had been inducted into an archive. Not as conquerors. As contributors. The chamber that held us last began to fade, and the floor beneath us restructured itself into a single long platform stretching into the starlit vacuum. And there, docked perfectly at the end, was the Indira 7, humming softly, systems online, engines warm. Waiting for us. We boarded without speaking. As the ship detached, the base behind us became pure stardust, ascending, dispersing, becoming part of the constellation that watched us as children. In that moment, I understood what Halverson had done. He hadn't died. He translated. He had given the one thing humanity rarely offered willingly, self. And in return, the cosmos had whispered gently but clearly. You are now remembered.